Well, I was doing a little show prep over the past week, and I had an opportunity to get an attorney on, trial attorney, and her name is Stacy Schneider, and you'll probably recognize her when she comes on. She worked as a legal analyst for Fox. She's been on CNN, Headline News, and when they say that she's on The Apprentice, I said, I got to get this lady on. Hey, you've been on The Apprentice, man. There's got to be some juicy stories here, huh? Oh, hi, Stacy.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Now, I noticed you didn't put that in your bio. It's not right up there at the top. But is that something that you enjoyed? Yeah.
Being on The Apprentice? Yeah, I was on season 5 of The Apprentice. That was the last season. The show was based in New York City, which is where I'm from. And it was definitely an experience of a lifetime in many different ways.
Yeah. I always wonder about the nuts and bolts of something like that. Did you folks actually live together, or is it just, in television, everything's highly edited. I get that. But did you come in and do it in one day?
No, it's, the shoot is over several weeks. We lived in a studio all together, and the studio is actually inside Trump Tower. The entire floor of the tower was made into a television studio that we were living life in 24 hours a day, and then Donald Trump would come in and out of the studio when he was necessary to the storyline, which was at the end when people got fired, of course.
It was a ratings giant too, wasn't it?
It was a ratings giant, and it was definitely an interesting experience. And I see a lot of the same thing, or I should say saw now that 4 years have gone by, a lot of the way people fawn over Donald Trump. I saw that during the show, where when he walked into a room, everybody was drawn to him and wanted to be a part of his aura and his world. And I saw a lot of that, just being an observer of the news in Washington, D.C., with some of these senators and Congress people who he initially attacked and then ended up fawning all over him. And I just thought, looks like something we saw in the show. It's a very strange and interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Now, is it necessarily, there's people out there that say that he's a wonderful man, does a lot of things for other people, but then they say that he can be very coarse, too. What side do you remember of Donald Trump?
Well, I saw him in the domain of a television show where he was the star and the executive producer. But I grew up in New York, and we lived with Donald Trump on the front page of our newspapers all the time, and he wasn't considered to be a very upstanding citizen of the community. He, allegedly ripped a lot of people off. I know some of those vendors. He didn't pay, when he was in the construction business, he allegedly didn't pay anybody. He went into contracts and then for a certain amount, and then would pay people pennies on the dollar if he even paid at all. He had a very, very bad reputation in New York as not being a good person. Yeah, but personally, when you saw him, he was congenial and all of that. And did he take time to know people? Like, did he get to know you at all? Yeah, he did. Yeah, he's one of the most charismatic people I've ever met or seen. He has qualities that are very unusual. You don't find in too many people. He has tremendous leadership qualities. And he took time to get to know some of the people on the show. But I was on, the 5th season, as I said, and as time went by, the more you try to interact with him, the more people had FaceTime with him. I wasn't one of those people because to me, being a New Yorker, he was not that much of a novelty to me when I went on the show with somebody, who's around town, who I was familiar with in certain ways.
All right, we're talking with Stacy Schneider. She is a nationwide air personality, and she's also a lawyer. She's the author of the book, He Had It Coming, A Woman's Guide to Divorce. And I wanted to start with this. It's very clear to me. I remember when Donald Trump was being inaugurated last year, and I was appalled at all of the demonstrations and then violence that was going on around Donald Trump, not near the White House, but away from it. And I remember one guy took a ball-peen hammer to a plate glass window. Another set a car on fire. To your knowledge, did those people get prosecuted for that? Did they ever do their time?
Well, I mean, anytime there's widespread damage in a mob scene, the law enforcement has, an ability to seek out those people, and sometimes they will use facial recognition technology, which they take images off of surveillance cameras that are on the street or in front of buildings. They freeze those images. They run them through the facial recognition software, and they can actually, come up with very good matches that leads to warrants generated for those individuals' arrests. The officers also rely a lot on what's posted on social media. So a passerby who's videotaping the mob and captures someone committing a crime, committing property damage or assault or some type of violent act, they post it on social media. There are law enforcement teams who comb through social media trying to, see what's posted and use that as evidence in law enforcement techniques and gathering footage on people to identify them for arrest.
Well, Stacy, I've consistently said on my show there should never be any violence here. That's never a means to an end. And, those people that breached the Capitol, that is a terrible thing that happened. And, also the same thing with Rand Paul when he was assaulted coming out of the Trump campaign at night in the White House. And we've had other instances where people have, but is there a difference on this in the Capitol? I mean, I think it's probably an obvious question. This does rise to a different level, the people that went into the Capitol, right?
Yeah, well, the difference here is they invaded federal property and they did damage on federal property, and that, therefore, is a federal crime. And federal crimes have much higher penalties than state crimes, usually. The jail sentences are higher, the fines are higher. Navigating through defending oneself in federal court is a much more difficult process. It's a much stricter court, and it rises to a whole new level when people commit crimes on federal grounds or desecrate federal buildings or attack federal law enforcement officers. It's like a crime times 1,000.
Yeah. Now that people have got the word here that these people are going to be punished for entering the White House, in your opinion, is this going to quell violence all over the United States? Do you think that we're going to see a downturn in this? And, Portland suffered all summer long, and Minneapolis obviously has still lasting damage. What's your thoughts on that?
So I've been a criminal defense attorney for about 27 years. I don't think people get, and I think it's a great question, it's an interesting question, I don't think people watching other people get arrested is that much of a deterrence, because most people, when they go out to achieve their agenda or have a goal of showing force or getting their words out there, I don't think they think it can happen to them. They think, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'll get away with it. So I think it might have an effect on certain people who are a little bit risk adverse to these kind of things, but I think the people who commit these type of violent acts and acts where they're not thinking out what they're actually doing is criminal, is violent, can cause death and damage. I don't think these people think about those kind of things.
A couple things that come up on my program. People say, well, we think that there were outside influences here. Maybe there are left-leaning Americans that went out and caused the violence. Are we going to find out whether or not this was, because the other Trump rallies did not have any of these kinds of marks of violence, and never a big mess left behind, as far as I have never been to one. But what I'm saying is that are we going to find out what is really behind this?
I mean, I think we can find out. There are thousands and thousands of pieces of video footage of what went on, of words that were uttered, of things that people were shouting out, of conduct and violence. You saw the videos on television, and the people who had invaded the Capitol were taking selfies and taking selfie videos of themselves walking through the building and ripping things off the walls and carrying away objects. And a lot of those people are getting caught because of their own video. And we're able to identify who they are. And I think, if there were some people from the left, I know this is a theory being floated, that who invaded this riot or insurrection or whatever you want to call it, I think it's going to be very few and far between. The people who are appearing in the video are demonstrably Trump supporters in their clothing, in their words, in their actions, in their goals. It just doesn't seem likely that theory is going to pan out.
In a way, it's kind of surprising because in nearby Butler, Pennsylvania, during a Donald Trump rally, they say that it's only about 40 miles from us. They had about 40,000 people there. They've had large crowds with, I think, little to any violence at those kinds of things. So I guess that's where it caught me completely off guard. I thought nothing would come of it. What did you think?
I was surprised that United States citizens would damage the sacred grounds of the Capitol building. But what I wasn't surprised at is this spirit of two Americas has been brewing and brewing and brewing. And, look, there's one half of the country that doesn't agree at all. But my position, in my opinion, is Trump, on the day of the election and going forward, was uttering rhetoric that was dividing the country and was based on false facts. I mean, if you go to 36 or 45 or however many number of court cases with and up to the Supreme Court, and you get in front of judges who were placed on the bench by Donald Trump and who are Republican-leaning judges, and you're still getting word that there's just no evidence or facts supporting election fraud over and over again, eventually you have to say, okay, there's just no there. And right. I think it just reached a crescendo. It exploded.
Yeah, so that's it's a culmination of all of these kinds of things. Something else that my listeners say to me, they say, we should have some measure of fairness here in all of the damage that was done over the summer. Is there any parity there? I remember when Rand Paul, he and his wife said that they feared for their lives as they were walking through the crowd in Washington, D.C. Does that rise to the level of this simply because he is a senator?
Well, in talking about parity, there have been threats and violence on both sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. All of it's illegal. All of it's improper. And people are acting in a way like thugs. Just given a social media platform or given a right to protest in the United States under the First Amendment, which every citizen has, does not mean that you have the right to go out and threaten people. Whether you're threatening a regular, an everyday Joe, you're threatening a senator, or you're threatening Congress people. When did we become a country of thugs that we feel that we have the right to threaten people's lives because they hold different viewpoints than we do? So
you're echoing exactly. Yeah, you're echoing exactly what I've said.
Yeah,
there shouldn't be anything like it. Just a final question here. What about, and I know this is not something we're going to talk about, but what about the social media out there? I've said something about, okay, there should be freedom of speech with responsibility. Couldn't we sit down and decide what is responsible speech and what is not? Opinion, that's one thing. But there's totally irresponsible speech with threats and violence and this type of thing. Is that something that can be hammered out for social media?
Yeah, it's a great point. It must be hammered out for social media. The Supreme Court hammered it out for the United States back in the beginning of time when they first started hearing First Amendment cases. And there was an original case where the Supreme Court said, yes, you have the right to free speech in America, but you don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded movie theater when there's no fire, because people are going to stampede and run from their seats and people are going to get killed. And speech can lead to death and violence. We just saw this at the Capitol. When speech endangers the public safety, it is no longer protected by the First Amendment. And this is going back hundreds of years. So people need to remember this. The social media is a brand new platform, in the scheme of time. It's the same thing as a newspaper. A newspaper is not going to publish threats to people's lives. And people, I don't understand how they feel that they are that anonymous that they can threaten our senators, threaten the people who serve the United States online because they disagree with their opinions. There should be more enforcement within technology and within social media of these threats. There are statutes that are enacted to cover them, but they're not enforced.
All right, but Counselor, can we do this and still keep the basic tenet of freedom of speech? Stacy Schneider, take that one, then I'll let you go.
We definitely can. We've done it in newspapers. We've done it on the radio. We know what is allowed and what isn't allowed. People should know better. It can be done on social media, and if the federal laws are actually enforced and they pursue threats that are made on social media to people's lives, then things will start changing when there are consequences to the behaviors. But so far, there haven't really been any. Maybe things will change.
I'm glad you said radio, because I said that the other day. Could we use the basic tenets that we use under the Federal Communications Commission for the standard of speech? I would think that would be a good starting point. How about you?
I totally agree with you. That's a great place to start, and big tech should start adopting those tenets. And if Congress passes a law that also imposes that on technology, I think that's a great way to control this chaos that's been going on. And it's unfair to people who are being threatened and living in fear and walking out of their homes and having to look over their shoulders and protect their families.
Yeah.
Things
all right,
change.
Apprentice, do you want to give information on how people can communicate with you?
You can go to my website, stacyschneider.com, and it's STACY, Schneider.com. And I have some postings up there about my time on The Apprentice. I have some clips from segments I've done on Fox News and CNN. You can get a little bit of an idea of what I kind of talk about, and a lot of times I say things that can be controversial or people don't agree with, but a lawyer can argue many sides of an argument, and you shouldn't hold it against them. They're just discussing how the law applies to life. So I appreciate myself not getting threats over social media. That's something we all have to worry about.
A 23-year apprentice. All right, apprentice, got to run. Thank you very much for being on.
You take care. Thank you.
All right. She was on The Apprentice. I'd grab them whenever I can. All right, Stacy Schneider, also author of He Had It Coming.